Welcome back to the show, all. I'm your host, Sully, and once again, I have another exclusive guest. I have RoboPulp himself on Twitter, Martin Cartagena. How are you?
I'm very good. I am awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a little
We had
intrigued by
been,
what's going on tonight, but very excited about the topic. So,
yeah, we were back and forth. We had talked about a few different film and music topics, and Alice in Chains was one. I was like, you know what? We've been talking about a collaboration. Let's just fire it off. Let's get it. Let's do some more music history. And in this case, this was a interesting deal because I was familiar with all their discography and some of their music videos, but I had no idea about the actual like people behind it, like their history and all. So this was very well
also, you're
to
not
research.
familiar with Jerry Cantrell.
Well, I am now, but like just growing up, I just I was I was mainly just listening to Nirvana and all those other guys, so I didn't know about their
Yeah, that is
troubled
true.
past. So yeah, I was born in the 90s, but I was also just catching up with just a lot of just all kinds of, especially grunge rock and hard metal and all that. How about yourself?
Yes. Well, I grew. I'm a little older than you, so I was kind of in my teens when that whole thing was happening. So I was, I guess, at the right age to appreciate it. Like at the age when you're like rebelling and things like that. That happened, and it felt so new. It felt like a shock. Like when you think of what came before, what was happening in the previous decade with the hair metal and how that reached a point where it became a parody of itself, where it became like the look of the hair, the big hair, the spandex became more important than the music.
All that hair, yeah.
Out of nowhere comes this thing that is the complete opposite. It's stripped down. They're not, they're not dressed up. Everything is very bare bones about them. But the music was just this thing. Like,
And
what the
even the
hell is this?
90s,
It had like a kind of grungy, rough sound. I'm like, whoa.
and already the 90s were trying to separate themselves from 80s hair metal, so it's already just interesting how a lot of people like to
Yes, yeah. Apparently, that
like
was
tune them
almost like their
together.
manifesto. Like they were just gonna attack. They wanted to just stomp what came before, and I guess they succeeded because culture shifted. That's the other thing that I find fascinating about that. The really big cultural shift. How all these
Total.
bands just got pushed to the side. All of a sudden, they were irrelevant. Like literally, over the course of a few months, they just got shoved aside, and maybe to the detriment of culture. All you heard for the next few years was grunge. For the next
Yeah,
couple of years, like it was just grunge on all the rock stations.
absolutely. And yeah, you can mix them up with all kinds of other just heavy hitters that around that time, like Helmet, and
I'm sorry, say
just
that again. I couldn't hear what you said.
you can mix them up with all other sorts of just acts that were around this time, like Helmet and just Blind Melon, just all these other alternative and just heavy metal guys that were just you kind of knew their sound even more so than their lyrics.
Yeah, yeah, because the sound was very similar. You mentioned that because you say Helmet and then you say a Blind Melon. And the thing is, each one had their own distinctive sound. Helmet had those guitars that always remind me of motorcycles.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly where on the range of guitar playing that falls, but it was like these kind of like roaring guitars.
it
You
was
know what I
it
mean? Like
was
they
weird,
sound like
just the way they
motorcycles revving
strummed
up,
it.
like bikes that are
Yeah.
revving.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
I don't know
And
where in the on the guitar, like where on the range of a guitar playing that falls, but I like that too. I thought it was kind of cool. They sounded like trucks. They sounded like motorcycles, like they were getting revved up. And then on the other side of that, Blind Melon had like a more mellow, more kind
yeah,
of
they were
almost like
they
a
were
childlike
more like
sound.
we're not rock, we're not metal, but we're just rock musicians who happen to be catering to the hence why we're alternative. We're catering to the pop kind of demo, artists, and Temple of the Dog, Stone Temple Pilots. Those guys were
Temple of the
kind
Dog,
of
yeah.
dominating,
STP, wow,
that's
yeah.
kind of where they were kind
Takes
of
me back.
going. Yeah, yeah, and everyone likes to just kind of act like, oh, it's just Nirvana or Soundgarden. It's like that's not true. There's what, regardless of who you remember or who you followed, they it's a big deal. So according to All Music, they started their gigs in the Seattle area and often would play alongside Mother Love Bone, and they got the attention of promoter Randy Houser. He bankrolled a demo tape of theirs called the Treehouse Tapes. It got the
Yes, I heard
attention
of that.
of the same managers who rep Soundgarden, Kelly Curtis and Susan Silver, and the rest is history. Because in '89, then they launched, and they worked with producer David Jordan, who was known for his work with Jane's Addiction. So then again, there's a similar band.
So there's a pedigree. Yeah, there's like a within that space, I guess, because these people will become names over the following decade. But at the moment, this is still like out there in Seattle. It's happening in that little corner of the world. But it's interesting to hear how it's starting to. This is where it's starting to happen. It's sort of congealing. It's reaching critical mass at that point.
Exactly. So they pretty much did everything right, and they just unfortunately still had some personal obstacles just behind the scenes. It's once again just another reminder that just because you're living the dream doesn't mean you're satisfied. And even though they were featured on the soundtrack for Cameron Crowe's movie Singles, and at the same time that they were touring as opening acts for the likes of Van Halen and Iggy Pop, it just wasn't enough. They had a few other setbacks personally. They added 2 songs for the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Last Action Hero, but again, there's so many great songs on the album for that over the top, comedy, but people forget that the movie flopped at the time. Like UHF, it was making fun of movies and everything, and it just wasn't well marketed, and critics who weren't crazy about the persona, ate it for dinner. So despite that, they were still kind of hanging out with the same kind of Pearl Jam kind of acts, just various. And I definitely was familiar in the 2000s for their MTV Unplugged music special.
Yes, it's a fantastic show. It's kind of like sad to watch it too, because you can see that Lane Staley looks in shape.
Absolutely.
Like he looks like sick. Like he's actually. They say that the reason for the gloves and all that is to hide the track marks on, from the needle marks. Because I guess he reached a point where he probably the veins were tapped out, so he had to keep finding new veins to I guess it's no secret. Lane was
right. So yeah,
seriously addicted to drugs. He had like a serious addiction.
For those listening, Lane Staley was the lead singer. The front man. Yeah, Jerry Cantrell was the driving force, and so to speak. I don't know what he played though. Sorry, I just knew them. Jerry Cantrell. He also one of the guitarists or co-singers, or
he was the lead guitar. Yeah, he was lead guitar, and sometimes sang as well. And then Sean Kinney was drums. And originally, the first bassist was Mike Starr. Eventually, he got replaced with someone else for the same reason that.
Well, ironically, he got replaced by another guy named Mike Inez.
Mikey Ness, yeah. So yeah, I guess we talk about it on a first name basis, like we just say Lane, and we should Lane Staley. Lane Staley was the lead singer.
Right. And,
I had my clip notes. I was wanna.
But yeah, Lane Staley was. Lane Staley was essentially, for those, if we want to break this down in simpler terms, he was essentially the less troubled but still rather troubled Kurt Cobain, of Nirvana equivalent. So as Melvin pointed out here, he often, the music video directors were just telling their crew, do your best to hide the fact that he is high, that he has been shooting some stuff up. So that's why they would put glasses on him to show the fact that he hadn't had any sleep.
Yes.
Grunge.com provided some very, very key cliff notes. He basically, he had a girlfriend who was a drug addict and was selling her body, so to speak, instead of just letting him know, hey, I'm in trouble and everything, I need help. And that crippled him. When she died, he basically, eventually, he just exiled. He would just shoot up a bunch of narcotics into his veins while playing video games. And the lead drummer, Sean Kinney, like you said, he was kind of a big, kind of like Dave Grohl in Nirvana. A lot of people were familiar with him, and yet despite trying to contact Staley, 3 times a week for years, he just refused to talk to anybody. He just secluded himself, and
Secluded himself. Yeah, exactly.
and
So that led to by the way, thank you for mentioning grunge.com. I didn't know that existed. I actually pulled it up while you were talking, and I'm looking at that, and that is pretty cool. Like all these little
yeah, I
factoids.
want to always cite my sources. I don't want everyone to just think I'm just going to the first few pages on Wikipedia and making shit up. And,
It's almost like a status thing. If you just go with the first 2 pages on Google, you're not trying hard enough.
yeah, absolutely. And I do want to have it read like some kind of loose essay of some sort. And out of their many albums, Dirt was a giant success, and yet, there that same time that it broke out, it's their first real big album, and yet, that had the singles "Angry Chair," "Wood," and "Rooster," and that same time the L.A. riots were in effect, and so they fled to Tijuana, and
Something like that, yeah.
yeah, their homes were getting raided at that time, and they just said, "This is too much trouble. I guess we're gonna take off for now."
There
And
is actually, have you ever, let me see how I explain this. I shouldn't say recently, more like a month ago, I discovered a channel. I think it's by Gibson Guitars. They actually created a channel and they have a series called Storytellers. And they have like guitar players of influence talking
mhm.
about themselves. So they had like Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath on it. I actually have not listened to that one. But they had Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, formerly of Metallica. He was in there. That was a really interesting one to listen to. They had Kirk Hammett of Metallica was there as well, telling
Oh
his story
wow,
from his side. That was really cool. I'll see if I can find your link and send it to you after we talk.
I see, and I
And
like
one of
channels
the
like that. They allow you to see all these subgenre bands and other just exclusives instead of just because like there's a few different, I think it's like ultimate metal or something that anyone can contribute
ooh,
to, and so it's cool to see someone do the homework and you know not just copy and paste from a clickbait site. But
yeah.
yeah, so this was before Mike Starr got fired as the drummer for his drug habits and tardiness
No, Mike
and
Starr was the bassist, was the bass player.
bass play. Yes, the bassist.
Yeah,
My bad.
Sean Kinney is the drummer. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's still the
Sean
drummer, by
Kinney.
the way. He's
Yeah, my
still together.
my
Mike
correction.
and
Yeah,
Jerry, they're
Sean.
still. I
Yeah,
guess they're
Sean was
kind of the
still here.
foundation.
On their third album, he was barely able to play the drums, because he had a broken hand. So it's just very wild. Just all this again,
Behind the
just
scenes, yeah, all the
obstacles.
craziness.
Oh man.
But
So
I wanted to say, going back to just briefly to what I was saying about the channel that I told you about, the Gibson channel,
the
guitars.
Gibson,
So
like the
Gibson
guitar,
channel.
nice.
Well, they created a YouTube and they had the series called Storytellers. Like, so Tony Iommi was there, Dave Mustaine. But one episode is Jerry Cantrell. And it's fantastic. Like, he's telling everything you say, he's telling it himself in his own way, in his own story. And he mentions the riots about how they went to LA to record and shortly after they get recording on Dirt, the riots start. And he said the
Ugh.
same thing. He talks about how they had to leave town, and they had to take these really wild detours because they would reach a block, let's say, and there's people rioting. So it's like, no, back up, go back this way. They would have to like drive blocks out of their way to avoid the riots to get to. Eventually, they made it to the country, to like the desert or someplace like that. And they were able to just kind of record, I guess, in seclusion over there. But they said the same thing. It was wild. It was crazy what they were
That's
going
a
through.
shame.
But
And we did lose Mike Starr later. He after getting arrested in 2011 for unauthorized prescription drugs, he was found dead from the overdose in Salt Lake City. So it's just like, man, they were not
the appeal of
satisfied.
drugs is powerful. Yeah, you think that after given the story, Lane, when that happened to him more than a decade previous to him, or almost a decade, you figure, okay, that's enough of drugs. But no, they just kept doing it. They just keep doing that, and eventually he, almost in the same situation as Lane, he found himself.
Mm-hmm.
So drugs, there's something about drugs. I don't know. I've never tried drugs, so. But something about drugs is so powerful that people keep doing it, seeing what
Well,
happens
and
to
he
their
had been on
friends.
like celeb rehab, and it's like that's bad.
Oh, he was in that show. I had no idea he was in that.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. But
Oh man. That show, the
actually,
people
no,
who produced that show were not kind to the
my bad.
people
That
who
was
assisted.
that was Lane Staley. But yeah, same kind of deal. It's just like they're just So I will check out that documentary. That sounds wonderful. But yeah, it's just
I'll send you a link after. I'll find it and I'll send you a link afterwards. I'll send it to your Twitter, to your on DM, because
sure
it's really cool. It's fantastic. If you want to do like a part two in the near future, we can.
we might
You may
have
want to
to.
like watch that and then like talk again, because it's fantastic. It's a really good storyteller too. The way he talks about things in this very natural way, like how he was a teenager. He
Mhm.
was actually became friends with a guy from Pantera, a heavy metal band from the previous decade,
Yeah.
who someone named Dimebag Darrell, who actually got shot on stage apparently,
Yeah,
which is
that Damage
incredible.
Plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so tragic when I read about it because I found out about him a decade later, and I was like, "These guys are great. What happened to them?" Oh, well, that
I
happened.
imagine, yeah, if you're from Texas, you probably knew Pantera, right? They're probably like
I mean, I
homeboys
knew
over there.
about
They're like the
Pantera was big, especially you couldn't go any high school or college without seeing someone with a
with the
heavy
Pantera
metal
shirt.
logo shirt, especially Pantera, Metallica. Is just, but yeah, that Damage Plan is just so tragic because kind of like Drowning Pool, another Dallas set band. It was just like the day they got big, they lost their front man. So it was just like, God,
What happened to the guy from Drowning Pool?
the lead singer died. I don't remember what he died from, but he
Oh wow,
and it was just not the same. They found a similar artist, but I was like, no, let's see
not the same presence, the
that
same
same
dynamics.
album and the signature sounds and everything, and just the producers at Wind Up Records. It was missing that, and it's a shame because you know I get it. You got to make the bills, get
I imagine, yeah, especially
paid.
the label, because they probably have invested already a lot of money into the band, and it's like, what the hell do we do now? Like
How do you find
we
your new voice? Yeah.
exactly. Yes, it's almost like starting over in a way, because now you have a new member. He has to kind of learn how to work with the other guys in the band. They have to be
Hmm.
able to, work as a unit. But the label just, we put money on this. We gotta get this out. Like you guys need to get it together quickly. And I imagine that's where a lot of drug use comes from the pressure of having to now become a band immediately, because this is the thing you want to do, and now you
Hmm.
have this big problem to deal with. I'm simplifying. It's not that simple, but I imagine behind the scenes, there's all kinds of craziness. I was
So
listening
much.
to an episode of Joe Rogan, and we kind of going off topic a little bit, but not really. And the guest was Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, and he was getting a little bit into the craziness behind the scenes when the Smashing Pumpkins were big, which was around the same time as when Alice in Chains and grunge were big. It's their contemporaries, and it's wild the stories he talked about, like the people he would meet behind the scenes and how they have almost like mathematical formulas to be able to say, when we sign up this guy at this age, how many records can we get out of this guy before he either burns out or becomes an addict and dies, or something else happens to him. It's amazing. He said how they can almost predict to the day, like the career arc of a rock star, and based
Right.
on that, they make a decision to sign you up or not. So it was really well. I'll find that also and send it to you. You may enjoy that. Maybe in the future you
Sure.
want to talk about the Smashing Pumpkins, but
Oh,
that ties in also because Jerry talks about that, about the behind the scenes stories, and one of those is about how they were at the peak of their fame. They released Dirt. Dirt becomes platinum very quickly. They put out the other album, and then they had the songs for the soundtrack to Last Action Hero, which you said there were two songs in that soundtrack. Two songs by Alice in Chains in that soundtrack.
yeah. Yeah. Two.
Can you tell me the titles of those songs? Because I only knew of one.
Yeah. That's just it. Like all the songs that were on all the albums were not on their actual, band albums. So,
No, but I
but
mean, do you know the title of the two songs that were for the soundtrack of Last Action
that's
Hero?
what I'm
Because I
looking up.
thought, oh, okay, because I only knew of one
A
song.
little bitter,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and then going down. What the hell have I? And then
I am familiar with that one, which is
and the
one of the
rest.
best samples of
Mhm.
showcasing what Alice in Chains did, why Alice in Chains was this amazing thing to listen to, and still is in a way, even with the new
Right.
guy.
And the
Yeah,
rest of the soundtrack is all by Megadeth, Aerosmith,
Megadeth,
AC/DC, Queensryche,
Queen's
Tesla,
right.
Def Leppard, and Anthrax.
It's
So
pretty
yeah.
impressive. That's actually for the era, because all those bands were kind of big in that era. So that's actually an impressive lineup of music
Hmm.
on
And
its own right, regardless of outside of the grunge influence. But
well,
yeah, like
sometimes it
Darren,
can
they released that
backfire.
album.
they would.
I'm sorry.
Album sometimes it could backfire. Like the album to a movie could be bigger than the actual movie.
I think this is one case where that happened. I think the soundtrack eclipses the movie.
Right. The same similar deal happened with the mystery film Judgment Night. Despite having a big cast of character actors and being by reliable guys who did action movies, the film was bigger on home video, and more people just knew about the rap songs that were made for the soundtrack. So it is interesting how a formula can just backfire.
Judgment Night, is that the movie with Emilio Estevez, Cuba Gooding Jr.? Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
That's one of those movies that I would go to the video store and I would see the poster, but I would never pick up the movie. And eventually, at some point, it was just on YouTube one week, and I see that. Oh, I remember
and
that.
Like
movie.
Every mystery movie, you never knew if people liked it or hated it, because like any mystery film, that you'd get a bunch of people say, "Oh, that was whack. Oh, that was overrated," and then you get a bunch of people saying, "Oh, that's underrated." It's fun.
Yeah. In the case of this movie, I don't even know if that got a theatrical distribution. I get the feeling that it was like a thing that went straight to video. But
maybe in other
I'm
countries, but it definitely got released in the US here.
Okay, yeah. And it's actually not a bad movie. Like, I saw it, and I'm like, this is pretty okay. Like, it's not bad. I mean, it's not great, but okay. Like, it's decent. It was like
for a genre film. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, for the genre, for what it was. I love the whole notion how, like, have you ever seen the movie how, like, they're on the freeway and they take this detour and suddenly they're like in hell. They're like just below the freeway. There's this world that's just
urban landscapes,
neglected. So, but I actually thought that was pretty clever too. Like, I thought from a filmmaking standpoint, that was actually a really cool way of showing you how they're like in this place and they're isolated now. They're like, no one can help them now. They can only rely on themselves.
Right.
But we're good. But then you mentioned the soundtrack. So the soundtrack to that movie, Judgment Night, was better than the movie. Like, it had more success than the movie.
Yeah, and I was just using it as a contrast. It's just like, it's interesting how just record stores had way more spontaneousness back then. It's just
that is true. I think also there was maybe like while we're talking about this is, I guess, while we're on the topic of Alice in Chains, we're still on topic of Alice in Chains. We haven't gone off topic. It's just that while Alice in Chains is doing their thing, making music, the other thing they're doing, them and Nirvana and Soundgarden, is they're changing the culture. And one possible effect of that is, like, as you point out, there was maybe more looseness with like soundtracks. So you have big names in movies that probably didn't do too well, or that went straight to video, or were part of that little time window where independent. Yeah, that little niche of independent.
People were doing alternative distribution methods, years before we had what versus what we have now, where there's still people who, do self-distribute on a digital site, or they were doing the analog version of that back then. But I guess also the record labels maybe were a little more relaxed with things, so you didn't have names filling a soundtrack. Like you said, you have all these rappers who were a big deal at the time, and some of them still are. For a movie that probably cost less to put together than the album, actually, in terms of cost, in terms of production and recording costs.
We'll return after these messages.
Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast brought to you by four aging millennials and our outdated opinions. Join us every Tuesday as we discuss movies, TV, games, and even music, new and old.
Dude, what do you think you're doing?
Are you seriously trying to record a promo without us right now?
Well, yeah.
Dude, you can't just do the promo by yourself. Who's gonna listen to that?
Yeah, and you probably haven't even told them that we're a pop culture podcast where we always agree on everything. For instance, the Sam Raimi trilogy, easily being the best of the Spider-Man movies.
No. But I think we can all agree that Jaws is a classical masterpiece.
Nope, don't like that. But we do all agree that the sequel trilogy of Star Wars is the best in the Skywalker saga, right, guys?
That comment is so ridiculous. I don't even know where to
Anyways, that'll do it from all of us here at Culture Shock. Thanks for listening.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and booty debates, Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Breakfast time. Listen at breakfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR. We add them to our queues. We wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
The movie might have been actually cheaper to make than
it probably was.
Produced, yeah.
There's all kinds of irony. I mean, people had money to throw back then versus now, where they got to figure out, hey, if you can do it, basically kind of like, a music album, if you can tour and rein in a lot of, ticket sales, you're set for life, versus, a movie where it's based on, do you get along with the talent, and can you make it for the price that we've asked you to make it for without sacrificing your vision? It's there's always going to be just so much, too many cooks sometimes in the kitchen.
Yes, yeah. And that's what it feels like. In that time period, maybe they were not as involved. Like, they were not so predatory about the rights of the songs. Like, yeah, put it in there. Sure, put it in there. It'll be seen, like, and the result is you have 90s soundtracks that are classics now unto themselves almost. Like, there's some music, the proper studio releases, but there's soundtrack of that era that are almost worth collecting for themselves. And that's, again, part of what was going on with that era, with grunge, with Alice in Chains, is this kind of more relaxed attitude about putting music anywhere, whereas now at least the record labels, the big labels, are very protective about the rights now. Like, you want to get the rights to a song for like 15 minutes in a little independent movie that you make for $1 million, you can, or you find that the rights are distributed among like 20 entities, and maybe one entity is okay, but the other 18 are saying no, we don't want that, so you gotta go do something else. But I guess the alternative is that now you can just probably approach someone. If you like their music, you can approach them directly on what is the SoundCloud. I don't really hear it that much anymore, but for a while I was hearing that a lot. I guess it must be something new now, but SoundCloud was a big one, where if you work the platform, you could actually have a song doing really well in there. But I guess we're in the present, going back to the past. Record labels were just more relaxed. Record labels were saying, we got this band, they're going to come out huge. And we got this song. Well, we got two songs. What do you say? You want to put them on the soundtrack of this really big movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger? And the movie gets released, and the release of the movie and the soundtrack was better for grunge than it was for Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Kind of a double, but also kind of a double insult to injury, because it's like, then you're not going to buy it unless you've seen the movie. A quarter you might buy it because you like all those bands, but still, that's a quarter, versus giant crowd. And altogether, it's actually interesting seeing how many other songs they had in the vault that they didn't release until years later. Like 92, the bassist Mike Starr actually wrote a song called Fear of the Voices, but it didn't get released until years after he had been kicked out.
Yeah, that was released, I want to say 98, or maybe even later than that, like the next year.
99, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because part of the reason why that song got recycled, pulled back from like their notebooks or whatever from back in the day, is because of Lane Staley's issues. Because he reached a point by the late '90s where it was difficult to get, like you mentioned, it was difficult to get a hold of him. It was difficult to get him to do anything.
Where is he?
Yeah, exactly. And so Jerry Cantrell in Storytellers in the Gibson YouTube channel, he talks about that, about how frustrating it was to do something because Jerry was like a working person. Like he took this thing seriously. He was there long hours with the engineers, with making sure the album was exactly the way it should.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a work ethic that was kind of the opposite of Lane Staley. Lane was kind of more relaxed. He had to kind of be pushed into the studio. He had to kind of be pushed to do multiple takes. And that's what Jerry did. But with his addiction, with his problems, he just wouldn't show up in the studios because there was no communication among the members of the band. Jerry would show up to the studio in the morning and they would just wait and wait, literally wait an entire day. It was nighttime. And Lane just didn't show up. And I guess eventually something was worked out where they were able to get the song recorded and all that.
They
but
must
it
have
was
been making enough income to where the producers were waiting until like near the end to just say, okay, something's got to go.
Studio space, hanging out in a studio, which is very expensive.
Yeah, we'll give you 3 years to figure this out, because we're already making plenty of music. If they were repped by Soundgarden, I'm sure they were making plenty of income from Chris Cornell's still. And
I guess so, yeah. Very sure moved on the part of Chris Cornell too to marry Susan Silver.
Very similar. And so Dave Jordan, the producer, I saw, and I never thought of this, but apparently, the Man in the Box, they are like, hey, Jerry, you got to use a voice box in this, just for the vocals, because he had listened to Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi and he thought, this will make it a success. So the that's people think it's a guitar, but it's actually a voice box. But it's interesting because they were already with the formula, just oldest trick in the book. Everything can share the same bill because it's all got to look and sound alike. But be different.
They were kind of plucking from something previous to bring it into this thing. And like I said, that's probably my first experience of Alice in Chains, listening to that song. And I cannot remember exactly where I was, but I remember stopping what I was doing to listen because I couldn't articulate it.
Ones.
Yeah, but I remember like, this is different. This is something different. Like in this landscape of sameness, here's this thing that doesn't sound like anything else. Yet it draws from that. It draws from what came before because in interviews, Jerry Cantrell has stated that he was influenced by hair metal. Like the foundation of Alice in Chains is actually hair metal or heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
And he eventually went in a different direction, but that was there. Like hair metal was a direction. And if you ever find footage of them on YouTube, like old videos from like say 1986, 87, they look like a hair metal band. They got old big hair. They got like a really flamboyant, exaggerated kid. And it's kind of fascinating to see that. Then you see the videos 1988. They kind of getting more stripped down. Their song is starting to come together, and you see how like now they're wearing less makeup and their hair is smaller. And then 1989, and you see now it's even more stripped down. Like everything is getting more stripped down in terms of looks. So the music is getting sharper, the sound is coming together. And eventually there's like a little video clip of 1990, and like there they are, like the mythology, like everything is there. It came together.
It's all there.
But it took like 4 years, and they started very influenced by hair metal. Like anything you can find from that era, they look like a Bon Jovi or like Cinderella. They look like any band from that era. They look exactly the same. And then gradually that starts going away, and there's Alice in Chains. Yeah. So like you said, Man in the Box is a song that draws from that influence, but doesn't sound like anything else. It was just like, what is this? Like immediately I was curious, what is this? Like I couldn't find out immediately. And back in those days, information was not so easy to come by.
We just had the lyrics on the CD or the record, but we didn't have like we say,
a little snippet that maybe the DJ would give you, like if the DJ knew about it, as opposed to this era now where like anything coming out now, there's way too much information on Twitter already. You already know too much, and you don't even know yet what it is you're even going to hear or see.
You had to wait for the VH1 behind the music. Yeah, especially.
Yeah, so I remember that experience. Like this is different. This is so different. So
they are the Seattle sound.
It's almost like
like all those other things, and just like people were, debating about whether rap was East Coast versus West Coast, and then it gets complex when Tupac is from the opposite of what he's claiming to, represent. It's just always interesting how people get kind of like sports teams. People get personal about who's repping what, because it just goes into the accents and singing styles and the demographics of who you're targeting as your audience. Some of my other favorite songs are Angry Chair, Damn That River, Check My Brain, Again, Heaven Beside You, especially, and Never Fade, and Them Bones, and Nutshell. So just
I like everything. Everything they've done has been just fantastic. I mean, and the fact that it's consistent too, that they've been able to do that consistently up until the fairly recently too, because I don't know how long ago, I know it was pre-pandemic, they had another album, they released another album called Rainier Fog, and it's pretty solid.
I think that was after 2013, right?
I want to say 2014, but I'm not really sure. But it was pre-pandemic. It was before everything that happened in 2020.
Right. Okay.
And it was still fairly solid. It was still like they're still there. Like it's consistent. When you compare other bands from that era, like say Smashing Pumpkins, I honestly don't really like their more recent stuff. I'm kind of 90s Smashing Pumpkins. I'm not really so keen on what they did after the 2000s, really, unfortunately.
It happens where it's like, hey, okay, you had your moment, your son. I'm just going to go back to the greatest hits.
Exactly, yeah. But Alice in Chains, they're still solid. They're still consistent. They're still solid, good, like quality. And I imagine a good deal of that is Jerry Cantrell. He's kind of the driving force of that band.
He pretty much had to take it over, basically, because everyone else is just, I don't want to say they're half-assing it, because they did bring a lot. It's just they, personally, they didn't figure themselves out. And it is a shame, because it's just very, very underwhelming when, again, you just can't get that kind of talent back, I'm sure
that is true.
And this is before, again, we could have seeked out any kind of reliable help. And I get it. Some people, especially famous people, are reluctant to trust certain counselors because there's a lot of them who they might have a license, but they won't necessarily solve your issue or give you a solution. They just kind of take your money. So it does make you wonder what could have happened differently. Who could have stepped in and said, "Hey, I got to intervene. I got to get you some kind of assistance."
Yeah, because I imagine also the label would interfere in some level, but not so much out of concern, but more because of the money invested in the band, which is it's a different type of care. It's more like about trying to get you somewhat okay, so you can just keep touring and you can keep making money for them and all that.
They pretty much they took it easy when they first toured, like in '88, where they were known under the name fucking Mothra.
Oh, really?
They would pass out condoms that said "fuck," and then in parentheses the band, and then Mothra. There's a Godzilla reference, so they're clearly we know what they were watching. And then they apparently changed it to Diamond or some shit. But then that was before again their demo went out, and they decided, okay, let's actually market our name. Let's change it.
Change it, yeah.
So, what is the meaning of Alice in Chains?
I don't know. Actually, it's funny. I never gave it. I might have remembered that once. But...
It's a takeoff of Alice in Wonderland with an S in it.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay. I figured Alice in Wonderland, but I didn't. I figured Chains was just enslaved or something. Jeez.
Maybe it's a reference to addiction, I guess, because that's such a big theme among.
No, it's S&M, the sex act.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's a bit of a private joke then, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and that's the fun. I mean, just like there's rock bands like Spock's Brain, or Spock's Beard. It's funny seeing.
What are they called? Spock's Beard?
Spock's Beard. It's after the Star Trek character's evil alter
Spock.
ego. So
yeah.
It's funny
like the evil one, the one with the goatee kind of thing.
Yeah,
evil Spock.
That's part of the deal. Is you can do some pop culture references, and you got to have a weird name. That's part of the marketing hack. So
it's interesting. You brought up an interesting thing about not only Alice in Chains but grunge in general. They were actually funny people. Like they actually had a sense of humor. But it's interesting because they became associated with darkness, with like bleakness and depression and all that.
I think a lot of that was the media brainwashing.
I think so. Yeah, they kind of played up that angle, but as a whole, like all those guys were actually funny. Like they didn't take the whole thing too seriously, and they had all kinds of little jokes like that, like little jokes and hidden meanings, and like just things they did to fuck with the media. I guess little things they did to fuck with fans to maybe make them wonder about things.
Yeah. But it is funny though which ones didn't know they were a big deal until they themselves got parody. Like Weird Al was told by Kurt Cobain he didn't realize, they had made it big until he parodied their song Sounds Like Teen Spirit. So but no, that is true. Kind of like how the media was, blaming rap music for violence in urban areas. They were always, Catholic groups trying to break down, Christian organizations trying to ban music because they figured, hey, a few of these bands are Satanists or have a demonic imagery. They're brainwashing our kids, going to make them, serial killers. So I'm pretty sure plenty of that was here, but grunge was kind of just breaking in there through for more than just like kind of the druggy crowd and more just the punks in school. It was kind of an underground scene that was taking off because people just really loved their melodies. But like you say, they would have some wacky stuff in there. Looking at some of the other fact sheets on various sites, it was actually interesting to me how many they had a few very depressing music video ideas, and they all eventually shouted down the ideas. I think Jerry came up with one, and it was too depressing. And after the other frontman had passed away, and there's like, this isn't going to serve you in terms of record sales. No one's going to pay to watch this video because that's right, guys. Back in the day, it came on a videotape.
Does it mention what the idea was? Like, what was his idea for the music video?
Let's look it up again. It was it was so wild. It's actually pretty sad. Alice in Chains, Abandoned Music. Oh wait, I just had it. This comes from Spin Diddy, and basically they were gonna do a music video for the song Sea of Sorrow, and basically Jerry wanted to make it be a spaghetti western with a brothel of whores and a gunfight, and the band would be performing. And even though it was supposed to be comedic relief, what's his name? Thod Beard just was told by his family, this isn't going to make you any money, and then he quit the production. And a Sea of Sorrow music video was produced years later, but it had nothing to do with Bird's, vision. So
well, that sounds like really kind of fun. Like the idea of shooting it like a western, because I mean the song is very bleak. Like Sea of Sorrow is a really depressing song, and the way it's shot actually is kind of like a bleak. It's like black and white, like this acid exposed film stock. And at one point you can see Lane. It looks like he's like in a pool of mud. I don't know, like what they propose sounds kind of cool because I'd imagine something very colorful and maybe fun. Like, I don't know, maybe they're having like showdowns and things like that. It's too bad they didn't use that. Sounds actually, I think I would have enjoyed that more than the actual video that they released, which probably was cheaper to shoot because they probably shot that in a soundstage and it's just them playing music versus something they would have to go find like sound stages or like one of those abandoned back lots where they used to shoot westerns. They'd have to go do something like that. That would probably cost more, but I'd rather have that, I guess. That sounds kind of fun. That idea sounds kind of fun. Actually.
I must have been thinking of someone else that they got shouted down that had depressing themes. So yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, because it's hard to get away from depression. Like, I mean, I don't know, like I don't really see that myself. Like, I mean, I understand, but like I'm not depressed when I listen to Alice in Chains. Like I feel actually it's very slice of life. It feels like it's just living. It's just simply what it is to be alive, to have to exist with other people, to have to make compromises, to live, to exist, and to be with people. Well, the compromises you make with your partner, like with your life partner, the compromises you make at work, like the compromises you make for the sake of getting along. That's what it feels like to me. It doesn't feel like it's despair. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, like Dostoevsky, let's say. It doesn't feel that is depressing to me.
Right.
No, but it doesn't feel that way. But I get it. It's not for everybody. It's something. Dirt, for example, I consider that to be a masterpiece, but I would not recommend that to someone with like chemical imbalance, someone prone to depression. Like I wouldn't
Probably
recommend that
not.
album because that album is almost like a horror story, really, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
In a
No
way, it's
telling
like
what
a
other
yeah.
notes they were
But
getting.
in terms of sheer musical artistry, it's amazing. It's a fantastic listening experience. It's where you see them come together. It's where you see that interplay of Jerry's guitar and Lane's voice. Like you said earlier, Lane's voice is like an instrument. He uses the voice like
Right.
an instrument in a number of places. Where you listen to little things like breakdowns and little mini moments that he does, and I'm like, is that his voice or is that like they use something? And it's his voice. Like it was just amazing, just outstanding. And then there's the harmonies too, the way they sort of like work together, like Jerry and Lane. They
Yeah.
create these sort of overlapping harmonies there's really nothing like that. Of all the guys in grunge, of all the bands of that era,
Oh, and just
that
that
was their thing.
echo
They
kind
had
of
that corner on
effect.
that.
They're all singing it
Yeah,
together. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it was just an amazing. Still is. I mean, it still is. But like I said, it's one of those. When you people want recommendations, and there's that thing that you kind of want to recommend, but you're cautious. Like it's a cautious recommend. It's like that. Like Dirt is like that. It's something. If you're in a certain state of mind, I don't recommend it because it might just send you over the edge. I know I'm not exaggerating. It seems like I'm exaggerating, but yeah, if you're caught in at the wrong time in a very vulnerable moment, that album is probably not a good thing to listen to. But if you simply appreciate musicians just working at the peak of their form, then listen to Dirt. It's amazing. It's literally unique. It's one of the best things of the 90s, possibly the 20th century.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have any issue with any of their albums that I've listened to. I think they're all just. I mean, it's just kind of like you say. It's just very rare kind of harmony, a very rare kind of just escapade.
Yeah, totally. No, that's what I mean. They're consistently good, but in there they reach like a peak. When people, when someone peaks, an artist or an athlete peaks, that was kind of like a peak. They did something amazing. They kind of channel all that dark energy and they made something beautiful out of it, I guess, because they were all having their problems when they were making the album. They all had their, their personal problems, their addiction, all that stuff. And they were able to take all that and just channel it and make something beautiful. They took all that dark, ugly energy and created something beautiful that still stands to this day. When you listen to that now, it feels very contemporary. It feels like something made just a little while ago.
They couldn't, yeah. Even when they continue this, they've been doing it long enough that they're comfortable doing what they do. But I think much like Megadeth, they just kind of were in that rare oyster of, they're getting played, but it's after all the other big bands, that are better known,
Yeah, definitely.
And eventually,
it didn't hurt them. Though, from what I gathered, they still had sales in the platinum.
Yeah, they still made money. It's just, I think they just had to take a breather, as opposed to like Nirvana, where Cobain's gone, so that's it for Nirvana,
Yeah, which is unfortunate. You wonder, like, what more was coming next? Like, what would they have done?
Could it have gotten uglier? Could it have lasted another decade? It's
exactly, yeah. Maybe it could have gone either way. So it's almost like, yeah, like you ended up on top. Like, you're not going downhill from there. Which, to bring back the Smashing Pumpkins, like I said, like I almost wish they would stop making music for a while, not keep making music, because not only is he still making, the ambition still seems to be there to make these like epic 2-3 hour records, but something is missing. Not the skill, but something is missing. When you listen to Melancholy, you can see the ambition, the skill, and something that makes the album work. More recently, in fact, just months ago, they had another album release, and I think it's like, again, it's something that continues on the whole Zero, the character of Zero and all that, and it's like a 3.5 hour record.
Wow.
But they say it's just not there. Like whatever it was in Melancholy is not there. So
I mean, there are plenty of them where the producers stop giving notes. They're like, "Hey, the last cell was good, and if this one doesn't do well, you got 3 more years to come up with a better one." Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that in the contract, there's a little bit of space in between records to do stuff.
It probably has to. I mean, you do need that downtime just to brainstorm and,
totally, yeah,
test it out, perform.
But yeah, I wonder, maybe at least them, going back on to Smashing Pumpkins, maybe don't aim for like a big epic album. Make Gish, make the small album with only $1 million for a budget and without any ambition.
Whatever
Just
can make it
make
harder challenge, but a better product. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just try that. Just try that. Don't keep going bigger and bigger. Maybe try the U-turn. Make a U-turn into something smaller, something more limited, I guess, and maybe you'll find that mojo again.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah. So going back to Alice in Chains, I was gonna mention. Did you know they made? Well, they didn't make. They produced a web series called Black Antenna. It's like a sci-fi web series. And what is neat about look up Black Antenna. I could be wrong, but look up Black Antenna. What makes this interesting is the series, each episode or webisode is basically one sound, one track.
Album, Rainier Fog. Wow.
Yeah, and what makes it interesting is each episode or webisode is essentially each track. Wow. Each track of the song plays to this little action about two aliens on planet Earth. One is like a girl, a teenage girl, and one is like an older man. And they keep like stealing things to try to communicate with their own planet. And he makes money from having the girl just basically prostitute herself. So it's kind of, it's graphic, but it's also.
So the film is upcoming. The web series has been around a while, and this is back in 2019. And
yeah, this is shortly after Rainier Fog was made. And Rainier Fog essentially is the soundtrack to Web Black Antenna.
It's so wild how they don't describe where it got released on.
I found it on YouTube, but it's possible that because there is like a nudity and sex, they probably removed it from YouTube. I don't think it will last very long on YouTube. So I got lucky. I got lucky that YouTube didn't know about it, the bots didn't know about it. So I was able to actually not only watch it, but listen to the entire album that way, watching it in episodes. But now I don't know if you can. Maybe Daily Motion, that place, no one's watching anything there.
I see it all on YouTube. So yeah, maybe they just had age
it's still there. The whole thing is there.
Yeah.
Oh, might still. So maybe after we're done talking, if you feel like it, you might want to watch it. Let me know what you think.
Okay.
Because I like it. If you're a fan of sci-fi, I think you might like this, like Black Antenna show.
I'm seeing it's paying tribute to a lot of retro sci-fi. So yeah, it's basically the whole essence of a music video, an interactive music video movie.
Definitely has that. Yeah, like I said, I thought that was pretty interesting too. How they apply their music to this thing. And it works. Like Rainier Fog as an album works for this little concept series. So they're kind of expanding. They seem to be old guys in the sense that they come from an era of analog recording. The distribution system was kind of locked into records and all that. But here they are trying new things.
Yeah, they had to.
This new thing. And I imagine now, I don't even know what they're doing now. If they release music independently or if they're still working record labels, I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I have not seen them be very active on social media, so I think they're gonna keep surprising us for better or worse.
That's good.
I wouldn't be surprised.
That is kind of refreshing when someone is not on social media. It's almost like
they don't have time to piss anyone off, really.
Exactly. Yeah,
there's plenty of people who you don't want to know more about because you'll see the ugly side of them.
Yeah, you and I know that because we're on Twitter and every day there's like drama, there's outrage, there's something to be pissed off about.
Someone wants to piss off everybody, and it's for real.
Yeah, I complain, but I do like the platform. It's just that nasty side of it where like it's just constant 24/7 outrage about something or someone.
It just never ends, and
really
people are looking for it too, which is just like, jeez. Well, this has been great having the RoboPulp on here. Where can we find you outside of Twitter?
I am usually on Twitter as RoboPulp. That's usually my platform of choice because I do have a Facebook, but I very rarely use it. I have an Insta, but I don't really use it. I love that interaction of images and text that you can do on Twitter. So I kind of find ways to filter out the hate and the outrage and the hate and the trolls on Twitter as RoboPulp.
Well, I do my best as well, because I'm not going to use Twitter for the wrong reasons. Regardless of who's controlling it. I'll stop using it if there's no real traction, for the podcast. But
I forgot about that. I forgot that when Elon Musk formally took over the platform, people were losing their minds on Twitter.
Yeah, I guess just because we just knew he didn't really have any good interest in using it, but Hopefully there's someone competent enough to drive the ship, but we'll see.
But the thing is, so far, I don't really notice any changes to the way it works. Like my Twitter still works the same.
I know they don't like it if you repeat the same sentence, then the bots detect you as spam, but other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Oh, okay. Huh. I actually did not notice. But I did lose some followers, but they were probably bots to begin with, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, they're cutting down on a lot of stuff that's sexually explicit or just spam. So then I'm sure, that shit will go away. But it is what it is. Thank you ever so much for joining me in this very vivid chat.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I hope I can come again at some other point. Maybe we can talk about that Smashing Pumpkins next.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah.
Well, you have a great night, and thank you so much for this time to chat with you. So take care.
I'll keep you updated on when this airs.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a jacked up